back to memory. I got one more question.
Yes.
Ring a bell? Yeah. I was probably the only 9-year-old who had a Columbo impression. So some of you in here remember the show Columbo. We used to watch it usually on Friday or Saturday night as part of the NBC mystery movie. And if you remember, he was played by Peter Falk, who I think had Bell's palsy. He had some kind of thing in his speech where he talked out one side of his mouth. And he was really frumpy, always wrinkled, and wore a khaki trench coat. Always had a cigar. And he was always solving some crime that usually a very rich white person had committed. And most episodes would end, because a lot of times we'd know who did the crime, with him questioning that person. And you'd think they had gotten away with it. And then right as he got to the door, he would turn around and say, "But I got one more question." And he would always catch them in their lie. He would always, with that one more question, unlock the mystery. And this week, John is that person asking just one more question. And he does this as he sits in prison. John's been taken captive by Herod, we find out later, for upsetting Herod over the fact that he married his brother's widow. So John's in jail, and the Romans are still in power, and the Herods are still ruling the children of Israel, and yet he hears the Messiah has come. The version of the Messiah that John had in his head, and the one that he may have even been told that his cousin, Jesus, was going to be, was entirely different from what he was experiencing. And I wonder sometimes if the fact that they were cousins didn't play into this, that this is the same person perhaps he grew up with, climbing trees and having rock fights and wrestling with. Him, he wonders. Especially as he sits there in prison, he has to ask Jesus that one more question. Are you the one? Because see, as we heard today from Isaiah, the prophets, especially Isaiah, they did talk of the Messiah doing all the things that Jesus had been doing, bringing good news to the poor, resurrecting the dead. But Isaiah also talks a lot about the Messiah coming forth with vengeance and divine retribution. And he even talks later with the Messiah eventually having a sword covered with blood. The prophets claim that the Messiah will lead people to freedom, much in the way that people have been led to freedom up until now, with violence, with empire, with military action, much in the way that they were led to freedom through David and Joshua and other prophets. And even Jesus is a little confusing, as we could attest this Advent. Therefore, you must be ready, because the Son of Man comes at an unexpected hour, he says. And then he also says that his winnowing fork is in hand, and he will clear the threshing floor and will gather wheat into his granary, but the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. And our hymns are even kind of confusing. Our Advent hymns, they tell us that all mortal flesh should keep silent, be at awe as we wait, and that, lo, he will come with clouds descending, and that Emmanuel will ransom captive Israel. So even today, we've got competing visions for what the Messiah is supposed to be. And what it looks like when he's at work in the world, when his kingdom comes. We sit here right in the middle of violence and empire and all sorts of evil happening around us. But we too like John, if we're honest, have to ask the question, are you one? And I think Jesus gets this because he has John's followers surrounding him, and he tells them in pretty plain words what it looks like now that the Messiah is in action. And he also lays on them a kind of attitude or reaction that people who wish to follow the Messiah must have. He tells them that, tell John, I'm out here healing the sick, cleansing the lepers, I'm bringing good news to the poor, sight to the blind, hearing to the deaf, and I'm resurrecting the dead. Jesus tells John's people in no uncertain terms that God's kingdom at work, even in front of them, is to be identified with healing, cleansing, and resurrecting, and feeding, and bringing good news to the poor. And then he sets this seemingly low bar for whether or not you're in or out. He says that if you see all this and you react merely by taking no offense, then you see the kingdom of God at hand. Like both of us, John and Jesus, like us, both John and Jesus are having to recognize and speak truth to God's kingdom out in a hard world. And as we know, for both of them, this becomes a very dangerous thing. It lands John in prison and Jesus on a cross. Jesus' people were the people on the margins. He brought them in. And offending the powerful came second nature to him. And this work he did, bringing in people from the margins, was a great part of the offense that the people in power took of him. And so we see in Jesus that there's a love that's all-encompassing and all-embracing, yet at the same time, radical. So even being one who merely takes no offense at Jesus' work makes us blessed. He reminds John's followers, and he reminds all of us, that if we have this kind of love, people ought to be taking offense at us. Because what we're doing is not just going out in the world and being nice people. We're not just going out in the world and trying to be righteous or pious. No. If we're actually doing his will, we're going out in the world and we're pushing back the very same powers that he was pushing back at in his day. We are resisting through our undoing evil the very rulers of this world, both spiritual and actual. Like John's followers, though, we still live in this kind of confusion today, though, don't we? Because the kingdom of God, as we all know, is sometimes with us, isn't it? It's sometimes undeniable. We try to make that happen every week with the Holy Eucharist. It's right here, plain and simple for us. God giving of God's self to us. God feeding us. God sending us forth. Yet when we go forth to a world that, like John's day, is full of violence, is full of sickness, is full of poverty, is full of all manner of evil. And so some days we see the kingdom of God, and some days we see it in partial completion, and some days we see it just barely on the horizon, and some days we don't see it at all. We seem to live in Advent all the time, not just during the month of December. Seeing the Messiah in front of us, yet also at the same time wondering, are you it? And is the kingdom of God ever really going to be a reality? Will this gospel that Jesus makes known for us today ever be our gospel? And see, I think today we're given the comfort of knowing that if John can ask these questions, well, we can ask these questions too. I mean, he actually knew Jesus and saw him firsthand. Because for us, we live in this day and age, and we live in a time when the kingdom of God is still not yet present on earth. And we live in a time in which our experience will mirror John's experience, because when the kingdom of God does come, it will certainly come in a way that we never expected. John asked that one more question, and I think it's pretty clear that it's okay for us to do the same. Just like John, we too work as we await the coming of God's kingdom. And just like John's day, the working answer for our one more question is still the same that Jesus gave. God's kingdom comes when we heal the sick. God's kingdom comes when we bring good news to the poor. God's kingdom comes when we bring sight to the blind. God's kingdom comes when we bring life to the dying. And when we take no offense at Jesus, these are deceptively tough marching orders, because it means we're refusing to be a part of the evil that surrounds us. It means that we're holding up the work that Christ is doing in this world. So with one more question, my siblings in Christ, we have a vision of what it looks like to wait for our Messiah and to see our Messiah at work. And to see God's kingdom at work, and to see God's kingdom just off the distance. And to see God's kingdom among us and around us, even as we question and even as we search. Amen.